Hello, hello, hello.
Is that an echo or
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Hello, 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 hello. Alright. Thank you.
Microphone on. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with Section 19.83 and 19.84 Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. President Wolter is not available right now. He will be joining us online later this evening, but as a result, I'd like to entertain a motion to select the chairman.
I'll make a motion to elect Dave Baum as pro tem chair.
Second. All right, there's a motion to select trustee Baum as chair pro tem. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Sorry, and we will get that feedback fixed.
We share. Are you a share?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I'm not very good at that. Okay, so you called the meeting to order. We're on to roll call. Roll call shows all members present except for trustee Myers. Is trustee Pieper online?
There's a JD online. I don't believe it's trustee.
Okay, and then, who else? And President Walter will be here shortly. Okay, so, approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from the last committee of the whole meeting on September 26th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to department budget review. And
Like-
here we want to do something out of order tonight.
I'd like to make a motion to move C, D, and E to the front of the agenda.
Have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
To the top.
To the beginning. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
We have a request for the library to be first.
We
Can
have
it
a
be
request for personal issues for this to come first. Is there, whose issues are outriding whose issues?
If I can speak, and I actually made this request, the superintendent in charge of those budgets has a family medical issue, of a serious nature, and he is here this evening. He did ask that if it was possible for him to go first so he could go and attend to a family member who's dealing with some serious medical issues tonight.
Okay.
I greatly appreciate it.
We got the nod of consent from the other person who wanted to go first, so we will take that motion. We had a second, there was discussion. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will start with item 4C, Highway Department. Taking you out of order too, so you're gonna
That is all right.
hop around.
I can manage.
Okay. I'm not sure I can, though.
Before you is the 2024 recommended highway budget. As you'll notice, this is one of the larger budgets that the village has. Salaries and benefits make up roughly a third of the budget, just over $1 million. In the operating supplies and expense side, you'll see roughly $2.2 million allocated to that funding or expense category. Some of the major changes in the 2024 recommended budget is an increase in the state salt contract. That salt contract totals $331,000. Another change that you'll notice over the 23 adopted budget is that seal coating was decreased from $350,000 to $250,000 in the 2024 recommended budget. Another large expense in the highway operating budget is the solid waste contract. That totals $725,000, up 4% over 2023. On the revenue side, you'll see an increase in public charges for services. This is because we've been seeing an uptick in individuals paying bills for garbage carts, for hitting light posts and things like that, where the village charged them for reimbursement for those types of things. In addition, state transportation aid came in $118,000 higher than budgeted, which is why you see a large increase in intergovernmental revenues from state transportation aid. On the capital side, traditionally the village has budgeted $1.5 million for asphalt paving. That has not changed in the 24 recommended budget. In addition, oops, my apologies. The village board has traditionally, I did it again. The village board has traditionally purchased a patrol truck. The 2024 patrol truck is $286,000. In addition, there's a construction message center for $25,000 in the capital project fund.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions, comments, motions? Trustee Kaminsky.
I just have one quick question. I'm looking at budget line item 10, 542, 530, 3500, road maintenance and repair. And that was like virtually the only thing almost in the entire budget was up by it's like up by 14%. And I was just wondering if that was just because of inflationary costs of product or what that might be.
Good evening. Trustee Kaminsky, would you just mind one more time giving me?
Yeah, it's on the, I'm actually looking at a hard copy of it here. The budget number is 530-3200. And it's crack sealant, mastic and large patching. And that was one of the rare things that was actually increased. It's up by 14%.
Sure. Yep. Some of this is really related more toward some of the newer mastic products that we've been talking about at the Public Works Committee. And again, as we've been using those over the last 2 seasons, they show a lot of great improvements to the road. Structurally, the material seems to hold up very well. And so we're just looking to spend a little bit more money and do just a little bit more of that kind of work this year.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Narrator.
Scott, I just have a couple of questions for you here regarding the budget. The salt budget, while that doubled, is the reason we're doubling it because we have the ability to store more on the new site? It doesn't look to me like from a usage standpoint, that we need to go that much over last year, does it?
Sure. That's a great question. You will see an increase in the budget. And again, the budget and the timing of salt purchase is a little bit unique and probably very difficult to get into in this setting. But we're going to be contractually obligated to take our salt allotment for the 2023-2024 winter. And then again, before we get to the 2024-2025 winter, this budget year will still be going on. And so we're going to want to purchase what's called early fill salt for our new campus. And so we were actually looking for almost 2,000 ton. That's been reduced now to 1,200 ton. So we're, again, I guess I would describe it as having salt in 2 locations, and the village will be in a good position from a salt standpoint as far as the commodity goes. But really the new campus and having salt storage at that location is more the reason, not so much that we can house that much more, but so that we have it on 2 sites. And because the budget cycle doesn't quite line up with the ordering cycle, we need to make sure that money is in the 2024 budget.
Okay. The seal coating with and I hate to see a decrease, that 100,000, roughly how much less does that give us for seal coating?
And again, seal coating has been, even though it's reflected in my budget, it's been running these last couple years more out of the engineering budget. But I'd say that you're gonna see a little bit of an impact. There's no question we're reducing it by roughly a third. So again, when you look at if we were to look at any of the maps of what we have accomplished the last couple of years, you're going to see obviously reduction. And again, certainly very difficult times for everybody as we're making these decisions as a village and where these funds are going. Seal coating is a great way to prolong the life of the investment we make in a road. So we certainly should be doing more of it. But again, I'm sure we'll get back to that at some point.
Does the seal coating budget, though, that does not include the crack filling, correct?
Nope,
That's a
that's
separate-
the one that trustee Kaminsky asked about.
Yep.
Yep.
And then the other thing I had was under the capital projects, the 2024 patrol truck. Can you refresh our memories? Did you get one and order another? Did we have to do two of them at that one time, or how did that
Yep.
work?
I'm happy to give everybody just a quick refresher on that. If you'll recall back in, I'm going to get my years right, 2021, as we were starting to come out of COVID and we saw inflationary problems with equipment and so on and so forth, the manufacturer did not give our local rep enough vehicles that they couldn't hand the village of Germantown a vehicle. So we did not have one available for us in 2021. We rolled those funds, and I'm sorry, I'm getting my year wrong. We didn't have that in 2022. We rolled those funds, coupled them with 2023's budget, and we have since ordered 2 trucks. I think you'll all recall that, we were asking to make a commitment to something prior to the budget year, and I'm very happy to report that Truck Country, the local rep here, did hold true. They are providing, those trucks are being built right now. We're hoping to have them on the road, fingers crossed, by winter. And so again, we do know from the manufacturer and from the local dealership that there will be a truck available for us in 2024 for that budget. So we did, even though we had to delay, we've caught up. Those trucks are being built. They should be here hopefully before winter. And we're looking to make sure that we've got enough money to keep that momentum moving, where we're looking to add 1 truck every year. Again, we're looking for about 18 years out of these trucks, both as a lead vehicle and then as a backup vehicle. So we really want to keep that momentum going. Certainly a very large increase since 2021. We've noticed, again, like all equipment, we've noticed a significant increase. It's about 41%. And that does hold true, not just with the manufacturer that we're using. We're finding that same thing with other manufacturers. We've done a little bit of that homework previously as we talked with the committee and board about some of those other increases. It's not like if we went back to the Chevy, we'd be seeing a lesser dollar amount. We're seeing that across the industry.
And then one other question was that, I don't know if it was at a village board meeting or a committee meeting, the subject was brought up about the shoveling or the clearing of walks by by your department.
Yep. That was at a recent public works.
Have we ever really examined what that cost? And I know it depends again on the amount of snow, et cetera, et cetera. But have we ever looked again at the possible dollar savings we could have there if we discontinued that?
Yeah, and I wouldn't be well prepared to answer that question tonight. Certainly, I know the time that it takes per operation, and we could probably do a little homework fairly quickly and get an answer to that question. Again, when you look at a storm over 5 or 6 inches, and you're talking about 2 people being out for the better part of 2 days if we're blowing snow, there is a lot of time involved in that, and then taking that amount of time times their cost and times an average number of operations, I think we could pull something together, but I don't have that answer right now.
No, I'd be curious to what that estimated roughly what that would be.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
I'll go to trustee Jan Miller first. Did you have something? Trustee Hudson? Okay.
Just one quick question. What's a construction message center?
Construction Message Center, the police department owns a speed board that can produce messages and put messages out. Again, just trying to take information that we've heard publicly and been part of other discussions here about communication and things of that nature. This would be a board that we would house in our department, could be used by both streets, potentially the utilities and also engineering, that if we have something going on in an area, we can start to maybe put some messages out and about ahead of projects to try to get some information out in the public.
Yeah, so I didn't understand your answer. So do you mean like a computer board that goes in a computer and sends out max?
Let me
Yes,
clarify,
text
let me
messages.
clarify a little bit more, sorry. This trailer, it's a trailer mounted system, and again, you would be able to program a message and it would
Thank you.
display it on the side,
Yep,
yeah.
gotcha. Thank you.
Further questions? Trustee Jan Miller.
Okay, would you please explain, what the solid waste contract is? Is that, waste management?
That is waste management. Again, that is both solid waste and recycling are part of the same contract. They're reflected in two different budgets. I'm reflecting the actual garbage or solid waste being picked up per stop, per house, X number of times a month, times the number of times in a year. Tim would reflect that recycling portion in his budget.
And then is that, on contract, Scott?
Yes, and I'm gonna just peer to my left here. I believe that's about a 3 or 4 year contract right now.
It actually is
That's
a
7.
7-year total. I
Right.
believe we're in the 3rd or 4th year of the 7-year contract.
Thank you.
Which one? Okay. And, is it an automatic, 4% increase?
It is, it is CPI, but it's capped at 4%. So it goes up by inflation each year, but the maximum is 4%. I believe the minimum is 2%. So it's, since inflation last year was 6.8%, I believe it was CPI, we hit that maximum of a 4% increase.
So you're thinking it's going to be a 4% again,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, I'm glad you decreased the seal coating, even though it's important. Um, I'm curious because I was told that, across the board, there was a 10% decrease in budgets. And I'm not seeing that in your budget.
There was not a 10% decrease of budgets across the board. I don't think any single budget saw a 10% decrease. Maybe the finance department, but no single budget saw a 10% decrease from 23 to 24.
And then going back to salt, do you have to store it in 2 places? It seems kind of inefficient.
I'm sorry, it seems,
Inefficient.
oh, by far the opposite. It would be very efficient. It would be extremely inefficient for trucks that are plowing on the western and northwestern side of the village to have to run all the way back down to Donjas Bay. So the village currently owns and has a salt dome in their possession on that side of town. Having salt there is definitely more efficient.
But down the road, the property might not be available to you. I'm just saying, it might not be.
If the village doesn't own it at that time,
Right.
we'll deal with it at that point, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And, I'm just going to, make another plug that, the Mid-Moraine, Legislative Committee offered a referendum for Washington County sales tax revenue 20% back to the municipalities. It was on the referendum in April of 2023. This village board voted it down, and the net effect would be for the village of Germantown, $513,000. And the intent was to be used for roads. So I'd like you to think about that and see if that's something that you would like or want to support. So it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, I'd certainly need way more information. I'm
I
happy to
know,
talk about
but
it.
I will be happy to send you information.
Sure.
Because $500,000
Yeah.
for roads is pretty important. Thank you.
let me go back to trustee Kaminsky
Need a
first.
clarification as to what this is, because I don't want to mislead the public. Does anybody know what we're talking about here? Because this is if the sales tax, if the referendum passed, right?
Did.
Which it did.
It did, but that doesn't mean that they have to give us the money. It's totally
It's
non-binding.
non-binding.
And they're not going to give us the money, but they're giving us our services, such as the dispatch center. There's
Well-
no extra money for roads,
Well,
zero. Absolutely zero. I don't want to
It's
mislead
if
the
the
public. I
munis-
mean, that's, everybody knows.
if,
What I'm
if
stating is a
enough
fact.
municipalities vote on it, it could go to
Not binding,
Washington.
and nothing's happening on it.
Okay, trustee Hudson.
The referendum passed in every municipality, and if memory serves correct, it was 73 to 27% in Washington County. And it was advisory only. And they're not going to give us the money.
Right.
And they told us that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we didn't turn anything down.
It's never been brought before the Washington County Board. That's what I'm telling you. That's all. That's my statement.
Then you need to contact your Washington County
Yeah, go to the
representative.
Washington
Understood.
Board, not
Yeah.
us.
You don't
Understood.
go before them. Okay. Yes, sir. Mr. Hudson, you still have the floor.
The only question I have is in regard to Division Road. So Larry, before he retired, had talked about building up some type of reserves for what's going to be between a $5 and $7 million project. Have we started that at all? Do we have any money built up toward that or?
Like this.
You know,
Yeah,
yeah,
no, all good.
I'll address this one. There are some reserves that are available, from the transfer of Freistadt Road, that are still available. I believe that was about, a little under $700,000.
638, I
Yeah,
thought.
that sounds about right. And the other option that Larry had talked about was some of the ARPA funds. And that is the ARPA funds are gonna be on the agenda for next week, as part of the committee, the whole meeting next Tuesday. That'll be on the agenda, and that would be an option for the board to designate those ARPA funds for for Division Road. I also did actually in a meeting with Public Works superintendents this morning, there was a topic of discussion. Kind of briefed our new village engineer on the situation. I think there is some additional research and analysis that we have to do, looking at the utilities. There may be the need for some utility work under the road, and that could significantly impact what we do with the road. And I think that's a question for analysis. So the reason that's important is the ARPA funds have to be under contract by the end of 2024. So the long and the short of it, I don't know that we'll have an answer for that this budget process, but it is something that, like I said, was one of the first things we talked with the new village engineer about, kind of getting on top of this and getting some information before the Public Works and Highway Committee.
Further questions on the highway? Any motions? Seeing none, okay, we can move on to the next, which would be section D, which is Parks Department.
Correct. Salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits make up roughly 68% of the parks budget. In the operating supplies and expense side, one of the larger expenses is the street tree maintenance line item, where we have annually budgeted $100,000. One of the other major changes over the 23 adopted budget is the increase in gas and oil expenses of about $7,000. On the non-borrowed capital side, there are 4 projects. One is the band shell steel paint for $30,000, the fireman's small restroom repair for $13,000, a single axle trailer for $7,000, and a litter vacuum for $4,000. On the capital side, there's the fireman's small restroom roof for $22,000, the helped roof for $40,000, pickup truck, or I don't know if it's a pickup truck, but a truck replacement for 60,000 and an articulating loader for 120,000.
Commissioners. Trustee Nyrider, we'll start at the far end this time.
Well, again, I've got just a couple of questions. And maybe it goes more to Matthew.
Mhm.
When I look at gas and oil, I see year-to-date $80 and then a budget of 28,000. Is there something that's not in here yet, or numbers brought in, or is it in another budget somewhere, or?
Yeah, so how it typically happens for gas and oil and for a couple other accounts is that they're typically charged to one or two accounts within the village, and at the year end, they're allocated out to the departments.
Okay.
So the Parks Department has certainly spent more than $80 year to date on gas and oil. And these 2023 year to date numbers are probably a month old with that. But they are
Okay.
budgeted, or the actuals will be shown represented somewhere else.
Okay. And not saying we're cutting, but I guess, Scott, if you looked at the non-borrowed capital items, if we get to a point where there's a need where we may have to go back in and make some cuts, without looking at the dollars, because I know which one you'd say you wouldn't mind losing, which, if you had to prioritize these, which is number one, without, again, looking at dollars, and 2, 3, and 4, would you say?
Before I answer that question, I guess I would point out real quickly that we had budget requests that numbered, sorry. We did have budget requests that numbered $453,000, and we've already gone through the exercise of reducing it down to 161,000, of which these are part of. So certainly I understand the question, and I would be happy to look closer at these projects. I guess off the top of my head, right here tonight, I mean, I look at the band shell, and we've been talking about that for a couple of years, the number of people that we have coming to the park. And so that to me might be a priority. We look at the small restroom shelter, and again, not looking at the numbers, but just knowing what we're trying to accomplish there with some painting and a roof and some water that's penetrating in. We're trying to make improvements to make it better. So again, I think that I would still want to prioritize those things. And again, happy to look closer at them, but certainly want to make the point that we've already reduced it by a significant amount to get to where we're at.
Thank you.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Quick question, street tree maintenance, is the 100,000 in total? Or is there some other street tree maintenance in a different?
The
category?
$100,000 that was requested and is part of the current budget is in total. While it's reflected in the parks budget, that takes care of all tree maintenance within the village. So whether it's happening in a building, on a street, in a park, again, in the heavy hitters there are the Wachtell contract for our forestry consultant, EAB treatment, tree planting, storm damage, things of that nature, where we've got some contracted service. And again, we're always trying to do positive things for the urban forest, trimming, and so on and so forth.
Any further questions? How much of that budget of tree maintenance is for new trees?
I did do, because I figured trees would come up a little bit tonight, I just looked back quickly over the last 3 years in our planting contracts, going back to 2021, spring planting contracts in 21 was 59 trees, just a shade of under $23,000, 61 trees in 22, 18,120, and 75 trees this year, 25,605. So we're spending somewhere in that window.
25% of that $100,000.
Yeah,
To the new
yeah.
trees.
Yeah,
Okay.
and as a quick aside, I do intend to, as requested by the Public Works Committee, come back with a plan on closing our current vacant planting sites And so we were hoping to increase that just a little bit and try to peg off about 100 trees a year, but we'll talk about that on November 1st.
Okay. All right. Any further questions on parks? Seeing none, we will move on to item 4E, buildings and grounds.
Before you is the 2024 recommended budget for the Buildings and Grounds Department. Salaries and benefits make up roughly 54% of the budget. On the operating supplies and expense side, roughly half of that, just under half, is allocated to the cleaning contract for the variety of buildings that the village owns. On the non-borrowed capital side, a couple of the larger expenses would be the senior center exterior painting for $23,000 and a panic alarm upgrade for Village Hall Library, Survive Alive in Dinesville for $25,000. On the capital side, there is a key card upgrade for $52,000 at Village Hall as we make those changes at the new DPW site and things like that.
Trustees? Questions, comments? Trustee Jan Miller?
Just wanted to verify that this key card, are we talking security? Is this an entrance key card? Like
Yeah,
a
we
key
currently
in
here,
the car?
we currently here at the Village Hall have a master key system. I think all of us have one assigned to us.
Real keys,
Yeah, we have
the old
keys.
fashioned kind.
And so this is really taking what we're modeling at our DPW facility and making an upgrade here at the Village Hall. I don't want to put them on the spot, but I'll look back to some folks from the library, of which I see one less. But and she's right up here.
In the front row.
That's also something that they'd like to look at that improvement in the future as well. So we're just starting to look at each building and see if we can peg those off a little bit year by year.
Is this more secure than the keypad?
I think very much so, yeah. More secure, again, the loss of a key requires a rekeying, which comes at a cost. I guess one could argue this is a significant cost up front. But I think that once the system's in place, the loss of a card is a deactivation or reactivation. I think it makes the building more secure. Again, as we look ahead to DPW campuses, police department campuses, all that kind of stuff, I think it really makes a ton of sense moving forward. I think it's pretty much industry standard in the corporate world.
Correct.
How many
So-
buildings is this by?
Sorry,
How many buildings is $52,000?
that's just this building.
That's just City Hall,
And again,
Gotcha.
Village Hall.
Yep.
yeah, just Village Hall. And again, going back in and retrofitting a building that doesn't have it is where the cost is. We're going back in and we're running lines where they don't exist right now and that kind of thing.
And what buildings have this now, Scott? Did you say?
Just right now, the DPW facility that's being built out on Donjas Bay Road will have a system like this. We've modeled what we want to do here off of that building so that we can hopefully scale it in the village in the future.
The police and fire don't have this?
Police has a different system, fire has a different system.
Okay.
Again, looking to the future, I would hope that as the new police department potentially would come on board in the future, we'd be looking to model something more of an upgrade.
Okay.
Their system's pretty dated.
Thank you.
Further questions? Trustee Nyrider?
Contract.
Sure.
That is that contracted services and what buildings and whatever is that for?
Yeah. And we're in the last year of a 3-year contract right now. And again, it would probably be easier to talk about the buildings it doesn't cover, which off the top of my head would be the fire department. They do their own internal cleaning because they're staffed 24 hours, 7 days a week. Beyond that, we did have a custodian up until a little bit over a year ago, and there were some buildings that she was still maintaining. We had budgeted last year, kind of anticipating her retirement to cover basically every village building. So that covers our parks, all of our municipal buildings, other than the fire department.
So when that contract is done, will we rebid that out or?
We will, and just to correct myself, next year will be the final year of the 3-year contract, not right now, next year. And so we'll start that process in probably about July, where we go out to all the area cleaning. We do a tour around the village. We received their proposals. We'll of course bring those back to Public Works and they'll be before the committee and board.
Okay. And can you also, under non-borrowed capital, just explain the library, the basement sump, and again, the senior center exterior painting?
Sure. Senior center exterior painting, one might look at that and go, oh, it's a brick building. It is mostly a brick building, but there's a lot of wood trim around the building. And again, if you look at that trim closely at the senior center, where all these little fine pieces of trim are coming together, they're starting to separate, we're starting to get cracks. And so this project is, again, just going in and sealing up those cracks and making sure that we're getting a fresh coat of paint on stuff so that it doesn't deteriorate. Probably more information than you need. We've kind of looked at the roof. We've got a little bit of an assessment on the roof there, and we kind of feel like that roof is going to last another 8 to 10 years, which will probably line up pretty nicely with a painting cycle again. So we're just looking to come in and freshen up the paint, keep the siding and trim looking good, and should do the trick for a while. You also asked about the library sump pump.
Yeah.
So we have a dual motor sump pump in the library. It's pumped out in between the police and library, goes out to storm sewer and Mequon Road. The system is original to the building. We did have a failure in one of the pumps during the heavy rains. Maybe that was last September, it feels like. And that pump failure caused alarms to go off. Again, proud of our internal crew. Our crew was able to, we were able to source the pump, change it out, get everything working again. But this is just, again, having a more robust pump, more gallons per minute, larger pumps, more gallons per minute. And again, if we do have one failure down the road, hopefully we have a better chance of that single pump holding up rather than flooding out the basement.
Thank you.
Further questions? No further questions. All right, that takes care of C, D, and E. Scott, thank you for sticking around.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for the accommodation.
So then I will go back to item A, the library. Thank you for your patience and allowing Scott to address his needs. Let's go back to the library now.
Before you is the 2024 recommended budget for the library. One of the major changes in the library budget is that there's a 4.5% decrease in the village contribution to the library compared to the 2023 adopted budget. These changes to the library's budget will result in a decrease in some operating hours, part-time staff hours, as well as a decrease in the materials and programming supplies that the library is able to provide to the residents. On the revenue side, there is a $30,000 increase of county library revenue compared to the 2023 adopted budget. On the top right, Tricia was kind enough to provide me this nice graph that shows the minimum amount required to be exempt from the county tax, and then the breakdown of village support and county support for the library.
Trustees, questions, comments? Tricia? Speak, present. It's up to you. Yes. Yes.
This is on. So some of the, again, all the decreases that we had talked about, cutting $100,000 in our budget is quite a bit of money. We don't have a lot of projects. A lot of our day-to-day operating is running the materials we provide, the space we provide, and the programs and opportunities we provide for the community. So when looking at $100,000, in the information provided in the packet, I took a look at our three main impacts that these cuts would take, being limited hours of operation, including cutting some hours for our part-time staffing team, limited physical and digital material, and then limited programs and outreach services, as well as our community events. So I took a look at all of those three services and just provided some additional information about them. When we're looking at the information, our total service population is at 35,000. That's of course much higher than the village of Germantown due to the fact that we do serve Richfield and as well as the town and village of Jackson and the town of Germantown as well. The service number is provided by the state, and that's the estimate of when we share these non-library areas, what that cost would be. And just really briefly looking at operating hours, we would look at going from 52 hours a week to 52 hours a week. Looking at 65% of our budget being staff and benefits. So cutting that 100,000 is very tricky, just cutting materials, programming, supplies. I really had to dip into cutting staff, and in doing so, looking at cutting operating hours due to the fact that we service our 3 service desks at the library. When we're open, we had 92,000 visitors last year. So when we're open, a lot of our visitors aren't just quickly coming in and out. They're staying, they're participating in things, checking out items, all of those services that we provide. And then I did some comparisons with libraries in adjacent counties, looking at the average hours being open at 62 hours. So the 59 hours that we're open now and putting this down to 52 would put us significantly lower than many of our neighboring libraries as far as being open. That also plays into our county revenue, which we had a $30,000 increase from last year. That is mostly due to our circulation increasing over the last couple of years and getting more funding. So when we start to look at things like operating hours, materials, programming, we're essentially competing for a lot of these county dollars, and that does play into a lot of unintended consequences of lowering those services, is not only lowering our expenditures, which comes into play in our reimbursement rate, but also looking at where people are choosing to go to the library. So less options can potentially equal less people using the library and checking out that materials. Speaking of materials, we would be looking at about a 10% decrease in our materials. That does cover physical and electronic materials. We've had a 46.4 increase in material usage from when the building opened in 2002. Last year, we were at 288,000. And our material cost was 102,000. This would put us down to about 87,000. And our average in adjacent county area libraries is 153,000. So we're already significantly lower than many libraries in the material end, and this would put us again lower in limiting what we're able to provide for not only entertainment, but early literacy, lifelong learning, education, all of the areas that we provide to the public. And then our last big ticket item I have is programming and outreach. Our programming budget last year was 29,000, and the cuts would put us to 20,000, which is a 30% decrease from last year. I have 2 graphs listed below. One is the programmings offered, and the other one is programming attendance. Both of those items has increased significantly over the last 20 years. We had some decreases during COVID, of course, and then we are programming offered. We're moving right above and beyond what we offered before COVID. Programming attendance, we're still not quite up there. A lot of the programs we did before COVID had to kind of be reworked and changed based on how we have our buildings. So we're kind of offering slightly more programming and capping our attendance. Before COVID, we would bring in 300-400 people in our community room, and we have a lot of space limitations and things just with how we run programs. So that's not quite as high as we had started off with before COVID. So cutting those programs, a lot of what we do are very successful programs. We have very high attendance. Our staff is very creative, good at providing programs at the lowest cost we can provide, and also really evaluating our programs every couple of months to make sure we're providing the programs that are going to bring in the most people. So I took a look at potentially what programs we could cut. I have a chart on the bottom. A lot of what we would be doing is looking at sessions. So for example, for story time, we had 120 story time sessions offered. We would be looking at having 54 sessions instead of about 4 sessions a week. We'd be looking at putting that down to 2. So looking at a lot of our programs having less sessions, some of the programs eliminating completely, and then having less sessions. And also, this isn't reflected in anything, but in all of our programs, we're going to be looking at how we can save money, hopefully getting some donations and outside funds, but really cutting back on a lot of the things we do. And also on our outreach program as well. We have a very robust outreach program. We're able to get out to the schools, to the community, all of those events. So looking at cutting back on a lot of what we're able to do outside of the building as well as provide inside the library.
Further?
Nope. I guess just, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide all of the information. I know the cuts are very tremendous this year, and that we appreciate you guys really considering the library and looking at the impact it has. I know there's not a lot of money we have to work with, but just my goal in providing all of this was just for all the trustees to understand what exactly the cuts are and how they would impact the citizens of the community.
Thank you. Trustees? Trustee Hudson?
Oh, sure. So I guess the first question I have is, it looks like your health insurance is going up by 44%. So that's a huge increase.
Mm.
So who gets health insurance at the library?
We have health insurance for staff that are ones that qualify are over 30 hours a week. So we have 5 manager positions that qualify, and then we have a couple of part-time employees that we worked during COVID in order to, we basically could not hire staff at a part-time level.
And what percent do they have to contribute to their premiums, please?
It's same as all village employees, 12%.
Okay. And then the next question I have is, so, and maybe I'm doing this wrong. So I add the salaries line from the 23 budget and the total fringe benefit line from the 23 budget,
Mhm.
and I get about $696,000. And so you wanted a $101,000 increase is what you're asking for? So I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. So on the
Sure.
recommended sheet that you handed out, it said you recommended $792,000 for salaries. And this year we had budgeted about 691-ish. So I'd like to ask, what do you want to do with the extra $100,000, please?
Sure. So I believe that covered the benefits as well, the $33,000.
I'm adding the benefits together.
Adding the
Yeah.
benefits together.
So you're asking for over $101,000 more than you were budgeted this year, if I'm reading this correctly, which that's, is that what you went and asked for, or am I making a mistake?
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could just chime in. So about of the 100,000, 40,000 would be on the operating supplies and expense side.
Oh,
And
yeah.
60,000 would be salaries and benefits, mostly related to part-time staff.
So the 792 isn't that, it's not just salaries and benefits?
No, that's total. Yeah, sorry. So that covers the 40,000, the benefits, and then we did have, the raise. We had a 2% raise from 2020. 22, 23. And then last year we did have a number of hours that were unfilled due to just not being able to fill them. So this would just put us back to our normal staffing levels. So we're not asking for any increased hours or funding to operate the library.
And then my last question is
Mhm.
the computer services.
Sure.
So So I know you've got the digital circulation, I understand that. So I assume that part of that budget is for the digital circulation that's
Is,
buying
yep.
the e-copies, right?
Yep.
What else is in the computer services, please?
So that also covers a lot of our technology services. All of our printing contract is in there. That's about 12,000 a year. And then all of the computers and equipment that we use for our internal operations as well as for the public.
So, printing, you mean like, copier leases, things like that are in there?
Correct. Yep.
All right, that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Nyrider.
When I look at budgets, and I've done a lot of budgets over the years myself in various communities, organizations, or whatever, there's always the fairness issue and how do you determine that? And, there's nothing written that says, so-and-so's got to take this kind of a cut versus this department or whatever. But to me, when I look at the library's cuts here, they seem a little drastic to me. And what worries me a little bit about the library is, first of all, when you decrease hours, people will tend to say, okay, they're probably not going to be open, so why should I bother going? Because they're not going to know the hours. I can remember years ago, I used to always be upset that the library wasn't open on Sunday because I worked Monday through Friday.
Right. As do a lot of people.
Yeah. And now I see you're closing, earlier on Saturdays, right?
Mhm.
So that's going to affect it. The decrease in part-time staff hours, that does not, am I right in saying that does not mean that somebody's losing their job? They're just going to get their hours cut, but they may say,
Correct. We probably would have been looking at eliminating a position or two, but we did have one position was unfilled, so we would just be not filling that position. And then the other hours, part-time staff are losing between like 2 to 3 hours a week across the board. So that was, a choice that we made instead of eliminating a complete position. And even if we had another position, we have to, when we're operating the large building that we're having to run different areas of the building. So eliminating like one position doesn't give us coverage in other areas. So.
and Tricia, going back to the handout that you had, page
Mhm.
23 of
Yep.
26, am I
Mhm.
reading this right, where under potential program and outreach cuts, you have the number of sessions cut in 2024, 161, and
Yep.
that would affect 6,720 people?
Yes.
So that's possibly 6,720 people less that will come into the library that may also check out a book, sit down and read a magazine. Okay. thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's where this all ties into our revenue and our circulation that, we've seen a huge increase in circulation over the last 5-6 years. And we've seen programming increase, and then a lot of that, we can't tie it exactly, but a lot of that has been tied to the circulation increase that we've seen too. So all
Well,
connected.
So I personally, I'm still having really looking at your thing, and until we get the whole scope of everything, it's not fair tonight to say, okay, 100's too much, let's put you down to 50, because we don't know what the effect is going to be of everybody. But I think it's, as a board member that's going to vote on this, I'm certainly going to look at this when we get to the total picture yet and see where we go. If you had to, and again, this is probably an unfair question, but if you had to decide on, again, not looking at our dollars,
Sure.
of decreasing hours or decreasing staff or decreasing materials and programming, what do you see as the most serious one of those three?
I see this, well, operating hours and part-time staff are kind of going hand in hand. But definitely operating hours I see as the biggest that we would be losing. Materials and programming, we're going to notice those cuts, but I was able to even them out enough where we can make that work. But operating hours is tough because there's, we have a lot of working families, a lot of working people in the community. Getting to the library after school is difficult. It limits, again, you're limiting people's access to the library and to those services. And, like you said, we haven't been open on Sunday in a long time. So even that right there decreases people's access. And then if we're taking away more Saturday hours, that's going to hit residents pretty hard with not having those options to come to the library when they need to.
And of staff, are there people that are non-paid staff that the number of volunteers that volunteer a lot of hours, or high school kids or
Yep.
whatever?
Yeah, we do have a lot of volunteers that do things like shelf maintenance, straightening books, things like that. We have some programming volunteers that help with craft prep, running programs. We have a teen group that volunteers a lot. So we do utilize volunteers pretty regularly. We also have a Friends of the Library group. They run our used book sale. We make $10,000 to $15,000 a year on that, and that we use to supplement our programming and what we can offer at the library. So we do utilize volunteers. We're always looking at how we can utilize them more and get more out of that. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo Trustee Narather's sentiments that cutting the library it does not service our residents and the hard work that you as the director and your staff have done to build these programs and get the right products in to keep the circulation going. And that's my little segue to circulation. You are funded, if and correct me if I'm wrong, 1/3 of your budget comes from the county, and there's some sort of a formula. And currently, on page 20 of 26 in your handout, it says the cost per circ for the Germantown Library is $3.74, where the average is $5.69. So we're about $2 under the average. That seems like a goal we should be going after, because doesn't the circulation help increase our Washington County funding
It plays it.
in the formula?
Yep. So the Washington County reimbursement is our total expenditures divided by our number of physical items we checked out during that year. And then we're multiplying that by our number of non-library circulations. So looking at having a very low cost per circ, which we have in comparison to other libraries, we're already not getting as much reimbursement as, say, a neighboring library with a $5 or $6 cost per circ.
So, I mean, how do we increase that? It looks like we are cost per circ. We are the bottom of clearly. And the highest is Beaver Dam at 879. Oh my gosh.
And there's actually, if you look at some of the smaller libraries in Dodge County, they're up to $18 right now.
So how would we, so circulation, it has to be at the product, which could be a book or CD or library of things.
DVD, yep, anything physical that's getting
Anything
checked out.
physical.
Right now, the digital materials do not count in that calculation.
But you do have DVDs you can check out and stuff like that.
Yep.
So if we shut down the library 7 hours a week, we're decreasing our accessibility. And I was just thinking how people are so busy with their kids and getting ready for school, and you've got this little routine. You drop off the kids, you run into the library, grab your stuff for the weekend or whatever, and boom, you run into the door and it's closed because they don't open for another half hour. So, I mean, people get into routines and you start taking that away and
Changes things, yeah.
they'll change things and maybe they'll go to Amazon. We don't want that. So, I'm not in favor of any cuts at the library and certainly not on the hours or personnel. As you mentioned, the library personnel got a 2% increase. Did you say that?
Last year, yes.
Okay, will they get the 3%?
We follow the village.
Okay.
So,
So they
what,
yeah.
whatever would be approved, they would get, and we do, based on merit, so they do need to have a satisfactory review in order to qualify for that increase,
Gotcha.
just like village employees.
So, can you speak to the timing of the budget from the village board and then the last library board meeting that we had? And
Sure.
I am on the library board, so
Yes.
I'd like you to touch base on
Sure.
that.
So at our, we meet the fourth Wednesday of the month. So at our August meeting, we didn't have the budgeting numbers. We also didn't have our Washington County minimum for tax exempt. So we did not have the budget on the agenda in August due to the fact that we didn't have the numbers. So I got the numbers in early September, I believe, from the village. Is that right? Yeah. I got the numbers in early September. Due to the timing, we presented at, I presented at GGF, and then Matthew presented the budget at the full village board meeting. And then I presented, what I did was I got the direction to cut the $100,000. So I worked with my staff to try to find the best way to make those cuts with the least impact to the residents. And then I presented that at our September board meeting. The budget did not get passed by our library board. The board voted unanimously that they did not feel, they agreed with the 40,000 cutting amount of cuts for operating, but they did not feel like the 60,000 was doable to make those cuts, and that it would have a negative impact on resident services.
Thank you.
Trustee Hudson.
So between 21 and 22, there was an increase in salaries and wages of greater than 10%. Why?
20, let me just.
So in 2021, you spent 630,000. And in
Mhm.
2022, we spent $708,000. So that means we would have increased our pay. And I'm not looking askance. I'm just asking. We had that huge jump in 1 year. And then next year, it looks like this year it looks like our run rate is pretty close to last year. And I'm just wondering what caused the massive increase there.
Are you looking at 21 and 22 actual?
21 and 22?
Yeah, I am.
Do you remember anything?
I'm looking actual to actual.
Actual dash. We,
Oh, actual?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, did we hire more people? I don't, that's a big, there's a difference there. What's going on, I guess is my question.
So-
My memory's not that good.
Fair enough. So in 2021, one of the first things that happened when I started in March of 21, is at the time myself, Michelle Tucker, who was the support services manager, and library director Trisha sat down, and we had noticed that
Mhm.
for the last, I don't know, 5 to 6 years, that their part-time salaries had historically come under by a decent amount, by about $30,000. You know, if we had budgeted $100,000, they had come in at $70,000. And at that time, We worked with the library and library board and library director to increase some of the part-time staff salaries. I think on average 50 to 75 cents.
I believe it was like, they were at $10.50 and we moved them to $11.50 and 12, I believe. So we had a slight increase for part-time staff wages. And then a lot of that was due to, like Matthew said, how we budgeted. We had always budgeted lower, and with our structure, our staff started working more of their budgeted hours, so we were getting closer to that. Does that answer your question? We did not add any more, we're not adding positions or anything.
Thank you, yeah.
And part of that was due, after COVID, we were really struggling to get people to work for $10.50 an hour.
Anything further, trustee Hudson?
No, thank you.
Commissioners? Anything else? Trustees, not commissioners, trustees. One question, why are all the county lines crossed out now?
Oh, sure. So I think 2 years ago, we went to a simplified budgeting system where previously we had all kinds of, every account had like a village line and a county line, and we just consolidated that. So there wasn't any change in funding. It was just how the printouts were. And with MSI, I believe we were not able to delete those accounts. But in the new system, in the new system, we just have just the one account, one name per account. So just record keeping, simplifying, basically.
Thank you. Let's go to trustee Kaminsky first.
This is such a tough year. And
Yes, it is.
everybody has to contribute cuts, and I get that. And yet you can't help but think that when it comes to the library, this is like seeing a little kid and then taking his candy away, because this is such a very positive thing for the community. Not that road construction isn't positive and needed, not that police service isn't needed. But I agree with trustee Nyrider that maybe we could take a look when we see where we're at next week. I probably wouldn't go 50%, but even to put anything back in, some fractional amount, I would have an open mind to that if it does not take something away from some other program that I feel we really need. But I could be convinced to budge on that.
Thank you.
Trustee Jan Miller, did you want to say something?
Oh, I totally agree with trustee Kaminsky, and I would try to put, obviously I voted on the library board to put back the $60,000 to keep the hours the same and keep the staff the same. And we're still giving up. So we were asked, correct me if I'm wrong, Tricia, if that we reduce our budget by 10%. And Mr. Kreklow said that not all the departments were asked to do that, but so I'm confused.
I believe the 10% was from the recommended budgets. The requested budgets. So not necessarily from last year, but from what the library requested.
Okay, any further
Right.
discussion?
Does that cover that, ma'am?
Seeing none? Thank you very much, Tricia.
Thank
Very
you.
informative. Then we will go on to 4B, engineering. Mr. Uselding.
For you is the 2024 recommended budget for engineering. You will see a budgeted decrease in salaries and fringe benefits for the engineering department. This is due to reallocation of the two vacant civil engineer positions. The engineering tech and the engineer reallocated some of those salaries to the TIDS and utilities based on the time dedicated to projects within those funds. On the revenue side, you'll see a slight increase in public charge for services. This closer aligns with the historicals for those budgeted line items. In the public charges for services, you'll see things such as right-of-way permits, blasting permits, and erosion permits.
Thank you. Trustees?
Just a question. So there's no capital expenditures of any kind, no updates of software or anything like that this year?
So in the capital budget, there'll be rollover projects. There's
Okay.
no new projects budgeted in
Okay.
the engineering department.
He's new. He hasn't gotten the way of the land here yet. So he's not asking for anything yet. Give him a year. He'll find a lot to get.
Wait, see
Oh,
if we got-
let's see.
Yeah.
So trustee Kaminsky, you had asked about software, and yes, software is one item that we're looking at acquiring is within this current year, within this budget in preparation for staffing in the future.
And anybody else? Trustee Nyrather.
Just for my own information, I guess. When we farm out engineering to like Rafe and whatever their name is, or whatever, is that normally charged back to the TIF districts, or are there times where, you know, it doesn't relate to any of them? Is there billable that go out to certain people, et cetera?
You know, there's a variety of things that happen with the outside engineers, and I know when we were having some of the conversations about getting these positions staffed up and adjusting the salaries, we looked at, you know, by vendor, how much we've been spending, and there's some pretty large numbers. Most of that is charged to projects. So, and those projects are paid for, you know, either by the tax increment districts or general obligation bonds or out of the utilities, or other sources. So the bulk of those outside engineering costs are paid out of those projects and those other funding sources. The other major source of funds for outside engineering are plan reviews, where most of that at this point is outsourced, and that's a direct pass through. So whatever we get billed by the outside firm that's doing that, we then charge the developer who submitted the plans for review. And I think, you know, long term, the goal for the village should be to staff up the engineering department. I think there's a lot of advantages to the village to have, you know, some continuity there, to develop that institutional knowledge, that understanding of the community. I think it improves communication on projects. A lot of the things that we've been looking at over the past few years, and I think we're off to a good start with that with Kevin, and you know, I think it will save money. It won't necessarily show up in these line items, but it'll show up in reduced costs for a lot of the other projects.
Thank you.
Where is our line for outsourcing? That in here somewhere? That'd be in here somewhere, but what line is it?
Yeah, it's 4,300. So 530, 4,300 contract services, engineering, and GIS.
Yep, and that is the line item in the engineering budget. If you look in any of the TID budgets, there's several lines for contracted services. Similarly in water and sewer.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Okay, so how much money are we in total with all the departments? How much money are we sending out in the 2023 budget? Now off, round number?
2023 or 2024?
No, in 2023, because it would be year to date.
Oh, I ran that a month or two ago.
You know what, I can look that up, and there was an email with that. Might be able to find it in a couple of moments here.
I thought I remember seeing some numbers, but I can't remember what the numbers were. The point I want to get to is how much are we sending out? Can we convert that to 2, 3, 4, 5 people to staff our new engineer up? But the problem is we can't find anybody.
I mean, we have, and in the past few budgets, we've had the staff authorized and budgeted. We just haven't been able to fill the positions. And I think some of the things that we've been talking about, the increase in the salaries, even things like, mention getting new software, design software for the engineers to use that will, getting some more modern tools might help us attract some people. So there are some things that I think that we can do to try to get those positions filled. I don't think we need any changes to the budget to make that happen. We just need to find the people.
And just for the year to date for contracted services, and these were for, the 5 we typically use. Year to date, as of August 31st, was 1.8 million. In 2022, it was 2.5 million. In 21, it was 1.2 million.
Okay.
And that's across all funds for those engineers.
Yeah. If I could also just add, just for folks listening and for the trustees, those numbers are higher than what we would normally see. For example, the engineering services for the new DPW building, when you add in the inspection, all the design, all that work are, and that's across 2022 and 2023 is close to $1 million just for that one project. So there are some really big ticket items that have pushed that number up. But again, it shows what I think where we can get some savings if we're able to, and I think better service by getting these positions filled.
Do we think we have a better shot this year of filling those positions? We had some challenges in the past. Those challenges are behind us now.
I think, right now, really focused on the DPW director and that's open for recruitment right now. So we are, I know Bruce Stelzner from PAA is actively reaching out and trying to find folks. We've got a lot of people internally that are doing that. And I think if we get that position filled, the fact we've got our village engineer position filled, I think those are important steps towards getting the other positions filled. There's a civil engineer position. There's another engineering tech that are on staff and haven't been filled for some time. And I think I think we have a real good chance of getting that staffed up.
Okay, good. Further questions? Sorry, I hogged that one myself.
So,
Trustee Jan Miller.
thank you. So, Matthew, you just gave us some statistics on the engineering from 21, 22, 23, right? Year to date,
Yes,
1.8 million, right?
for 23, correct.
Right. Okay, so does that include the DPW? Like more construction? Do they do any engineering?
No, the 5 engineers or engineering firms that were included in this was Foth, Grafe, Harwood, R.A. Smith, and Ruker and Milky.
Okay. And I think my bigger question, or just my question is there any advantage of holding any of these salaries in the TIDS?
What do you think of
Economically.
that? Holding them in the TIDS.
Splitting them out into the TIDS. Thank you.
Well, no, I'll jump on in on that one.
Because the salary clearly for the whole staff for 2024 is not $54,700, right?
Well, I would say, first of all, we do this because it's in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles that, if you recall, then I actually finished the recording for that budget presentation. I talked about the different funds that comprise the village budget. And according to generally accepted accounting principle, we should, as much as we're able, allocate expenses to the appropriate fund. So when an engineer is working on on a sewer project, we should pay for their time out of the sewer utility. When they're working on a water project, we should charge their time to the water utility. And when they're working on a tax increment district project, we should charge their time to the tax increment district. So we try to review that, regularly and look at how people are spending their time. And then make sure that we're charging that to charging their time to the appropriate budget. And that's what the budget reflects.
So this is the balance of what is not in the TID. Why don't,
What is not in the TID or the water or sewer utility?
But it's not directed to a specific project.
right.
Yeah.
But doesn't it seem that we would be, let's say it goes into a TID. Typical TIDs are 20 years, correct?
Yes? Starting.
Yeah. So,
We don't take that cost and amortize it over 20 years. It gets paid in that year. Whenever the work is done, it gets paid that year. We don't amortize that over 20 years.
so you're saying it's basically revolving. You throw it in there and then you pay it out,
Right?
but still there's a cost to that.
Yes.
Let's see. Well, welcome, Kevin, to the Village of Germantown.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to working with you and hopefully we'll get some other people for you through PAA.
Yep, we'll work on it together.
Yeah,
Looking forward to it. Further questions?
thank you.
No further questions, then we will go on to item F, 4F, residential yard waste facility.
The majority of this budget is made up by the curbside pickup recycling of the operating supplies and expenses of 367,000. 342,000 of that is for the curbside pickup contract, which saw a 4% increase over the 2023 budget. On the revenue side, it's the state provides recycling aid for communities that have a recycling center or residential yard waste facility center. That typically is around $23,000.
That was short and sweet. Questions? No questions?
Quick one.
Let's go with trustee Kaminsky first.
Tim, remind us what we're saving by going to one curbside pickup versus formerly two. Are we saving money?
You're talking for brush pickup?
Brush pickup, yes.
That is more of a question for Scott Anderson,
Oh, okay.
because the highway department is actually who performs that brush pickup. We just turn what
Okay.
they bring in into finished product.
Okay,
We can follow that up and email that to
yeah.
the board.
We can get Scott back here if you want. Call him up and bring him back here.
Sorry to
Rico?
interrupt. I'd like to hear that number too.
Yeah, we'll get it out to everybody in an email. It'll come from Administrator Krekalo. Were you done, trustee Kaminsky?
Done.
Okay, trustee Jan Miller.
Tim, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Hey, can you tell me how many staff you have for the recycling center? And will it change when you go to the big house?
So currently, the recycling center is staffed during open hours by 2 part-time employees,
Okay,
and they work an average of about 19 hours a week between those two. So they work 3 days on, 3 days off.
Okay.
And I do not anticipate increasing hours at the facility. It'll stay the same.
Okay.
Material processing is performed by sewer utility personnel. And I believe, Matt, we allocate 20% of their salary or 10% of their salary, 10% back to the recycling center and 90% to the wastewater utility.
great. Thank you.
Trustee Nyrather.
Just one quick question for you, Tim. What's the future of recycling? I mean, you hear people aren't doing it anymore. There aren't as many companies that are looking for this stuff. What is the future of recycling?
That's a great question. The Village of Germantown far exceeds per capita the amount we're required to pick up. So we're required to pick up 107 ton per capita, and we pick up 148 ton per capita throughout the year. So we're well ahead of the state mandate, but I have a feeling that that number is going to go up with the new proposed recycling law changes, which are currently being promulgated. So we're ahead of the curve that way. I do not know the future of the markets. There's always been a strong market for recycled aluminum. But mostly that gets turned back into cans because once you recycle it once, it can't be used for other aluminum products such as an airplane wing. Those kind of things are always made out of virgin aluminum. Cardboard is another one that's always been actively recycled because it's easy to turn back into cardboard. Same thing with newspaper. Office paper gets a little tricky because of the inks that are used. Plant-based inks are easier to recycle the paper than chemical-based. Plastics, that's a whole nother animal. And I'm learning more about plastics the longer I'm in this business, and something as simple as a 2-liter bottle, one being clear is very easily recyclable, one being green has no market. So yeah, it's all over the board. Glass is another one that's pretty easily recycled, but there again, depending on its color. You know, clear glass is a lot easier to turn back into clear glass than mixing browns and greens in with it. So yeah, that's a real good question. I don't know what the future is going to hold. Eventually, we're going to run out of landfills. You know, we're going to drown ourselves in our own garbage, I guess, in 100 years. But yeah, sooner or later, we have to find markets for it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Further questions? Trustee Peeper, nothing? Okay, that is it for residential yard waste. We will move on to water utility next.
Yeah, I would like to apologize to Tim. I should have put sewer next so he didn't have to go sit down and come back up.
Shall we,
Um,
how's your hand doing?
Can I make a motion to move sewer and water?
Sure, we have a motion to take sewer next. Do we have a second? We have a second. Okay, let's go on to sewer. Oh, no, wait. Any comments? No comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll go back to sewer.
Looking at the 2024 recommended budget for the sewer utility, you'll notice a large portion of the operating expenses is in the operation side of the sewer utility. 63% of the sewer utility operation budget is made up of MMSD charges. Those are broken down into 2 charges, one user charges for 2.2 million, and the other is capital charges for just under 2.7 million. Other operating expenses make up 18% of their budget, the largest being depreciation and debt obligation payments. Revenue projections for the sewer utility were held flat in 2024 compared to 2023. We are currently undergoing a sewer rate study, which may affect, the projections of sewer utility rates in 2024. But barring the results of those studies, they were held flat for 24. On the capital project side, there's a variety of capital projects for the sewer utility. The largest would be a county line land purchase for $1.1 million.
Trustees, questions, comments?
I
Motion.
do.
I will go to trustee Peeper first.
I know I've brought this up maybe a couple years ago in the past. It's been on my mind since I toured the recycling center with Mr. Zimmerman. And he showed me where we used to take our own wastewater. And I know when my dad was a trustee for this district, the village of Germantown, they were forced to hook up to MMSD. And I know I've talked to President Walter about it several times, and he said, no, there's no way we can get it back. But I know that question has not been raised to MMSD for probably 10, 25 years. And I would like to raise that question to them again, if it is possible to maybe partner with Jackson to keep our own wastewater.
Trustee Peeper, that is not an MMSD issue. That is a sewer pack issue. And there is no way that sewer pack is ever going to permit Germantown to have their own treatment facility. It was destined back in 1950s, the phased out approach and the move towards a regional facility, which is where we are at today.
So why do you say it could never happen?
I'll jump in as well, but in order for that to happen, there would have to be a series of approvals, a sewer pack being the main one, the DNR being another, and they've made it pretty clear that they're actually heading in the opposite direction. That, as Tim mentioned, I mean, going back 50, 60, 70 years towards consolidation of those facilities. Both for cost and efficiency reasons, as well as for environmental reasons. It's I think it's very unlikely and would be prohibitively costly to try to get approval and then actually get to the process of building the facilities to do that.
I understand that the process of building a whole new facility would be extremely costly, but over a time period, I could see how it would save our taxpayers millions. And environmentally wise, Milwaukee is notorious for dumping our waste into Lake Michigan, making the waters unswimmable, and the beaches you can't even visit them because they're filled with waste. So I mean, it's something that it's an idea that I thought maybe we could explore into. I know everybody tells me no, it's impossible, but hey, coming up with ideas here to try to save the taxpayers, that's all.
Understood. Thank you for trying to take a different approach. Anything else, other trustees? Trustee Hudson.
So Matthew, I assume these year-to-date numbers are different, have a different end date than all of the other year-to-date numbers that we're looking at for everybody else? Everybody else looks like they're 9 months, but this isn't 9 months, is it?
Are you looking at revenues or expenses? The revenues were likely 6 months just based on when we do utility billing.
That makes sense.
Expenditures would have been roughly 8, 9 months.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Further questions? Trustee Jan Miller.
Yes, so you just answered a question. The sewer utility revenues is 6 months because on the miscellaneous revenues, on the interest income, year-to-date is 5,000 and budgeted is 75,000. We've never reached 75,000. Why are we using that number? 60480-481-6510.
Correct. So the last several years, based on requirements for financial reporting, we are required to do a mark-to-market analysis of our investments. And if I start stumbling over my words, I'm going to hand it off to the administrator who can explain it better than I can. But essentially what that is saying is it takes all of our investments and looks at what we could sell them for on the market if we had to sell them today. Since we typically invest in more medium to long-term investments for our reserve funds, we bought several, in 2019 and 2020 at 1 or 2%. If you were to sell those today on the market, they'd be valued much less than what we bought them for. Because
Right.
today you could buy a U.S. Treasury bond, for 2 or 3 or 4%.
Mhm.
So that's why when you see those those actuals, they're going to be much less than the actual income we earned on those investments. Since typically we are not in a position where we're forced to sell our investments, we hold them to maturity. So those are unrealized losses essentially. And that's why I've kept interest earnings flat across the board for most funds.
Okay. And then, what about, on your expenditures? I looked at maintenance. We've got some, is this through, September then on expenditures? Or,
This would have been as of, it would have been right around the date I sent this out to all trustees. And I can't quite recall when that was. I believe it was around early September.
oh yes, September,
So it would have
right.
been year to date as of a day or two before I sent it out. I updated all the
Okay.
year to dates.
So there were some that were, year to date that are just blanks. Are you waiting for stuff to come in or what are we talking about? I'm going to take this pump. It's a sewer portion of the joint meter expense. 6820 toward the top, 530 2273. So it's budgeted to 72,000. Did we not get the equipment or what is that?
It's a allocation that'll be performed at the end of the year because I pay for half of the water meters that Paul's people install because we
Oh.
use them for sewer and water billing.
Okay.
So it's a general ledger accounting thing at the end of the year where those costs get allocated back
Okay.
out of the water utility to the sewer utility.
Okay. I was wondering if a project fell through or whatever. Okay. So there are a couple of other blanks, so it's would perhaps be the same?
Correct.
Or- Okay.
Further questions? Matt, can you scroll back forward one more page, the capital?
Yep.
Tim, at one of the meetings, this capital, the county line land purchase, that was brought with some contention. Hey, we can do this a whole lot cheaper if we run a pipe up to the northwest corner and then back to the southwest corner, a loop of some kind. Do you know anything about that? No knowledge of this?
I may have seen a document that was given to the village board.
Do you know anything? Can you validate that or?
I cannot validate
They
that.
did or nothing? You can't.
The only contradiction I'll make, and the only reason that this land purchase is even in the budget is lift station number 6 exists in road right of way. It's not land owned by the village. It's county right of way. At some point in time, the bridge over County Line Road is A, going to have to be replaced, B, going to have to be expanded because of traffic volumes, and the village is going to be forced to find a new home for lift station number 6 because it's right on top of the road if you're familiar with where it is. If you remember, a number of years ago, we had a restaurant come in called Buffalo Wild Wings. Wastewater superintendent, I think it was even at your plan commission meeting, said, we might want to keep some land in case we ever have to move this lift station. Never happened. So we're stuck with finding land in the area that is available. And this happens to be a parcel, the only parcel available in that area. And it'd be a lot cheaper to relocate a lift station across the river from where it exists by just having to re-drill pipes underneath the river than to redirect a whole lot of flow to a whole nother area of the village on a piece of land you're gonna have to buy somewhere else.
Yeah, I just never got a full story on this other pipe, so I didn't know if you would explore.
I don't know where the other pipe stuff came from. I have a lift station study that was performed by Ruker to Milky last year that laid out pretty well the direction we need to go. Was a land purchase at lift 6 part of that study? No, because the land purchase became available after that study was initiated. But it makes good long-term planning sense to not rule out purchasing that piece of land for the future.
Okay. Further questions? Trustee Jan Miller.
I do remember that, what you're talking about. Someone came forward, and it was a Rupert and Milky study that is online. And my question is, the current lift station by Buffalo Wild Wings, can you expand or improve that lift? Is that what it's called, lift station? Yeah. Can you expand it or improve it in the space that it's in right now?
The problem is it's in the right of way. It's not on private property. It's in road, county road.
Yep.
Oh, it's in the, okay, the
County
right
land.
away. Okay.
If Washington County came to us today and said, in 5 years, we're expanding county line another lane in each direction, you need to move that lift station.
Right.
The village would have to move it.
They would not, would they consider selling part of the right of way? I mean, it depends on how much they need to expand.
There is nowhere for it to go because
Oh.
Buffalo Wild Wings
Took up,
bought the entire parcel to the north.
yeah,
The road
Yeah.
exists
south.
to the south.
Right.
Wheat Farm exists. Well, you got the river in between there. And you have road reservation to the east.
Right.
So it's kind of stuck there with nowhere to go at this point.
They just did that intersection, if I'm not mistaken, with improvements to the lights.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of work in that corridor with improving the road, which is usually like the midlife
Of the road.
tune-up, if you will, of that road, with doing the bridge. And
Yeah.
then the county was in there doing a lot of concrete repairs. I don't know if you've driven it lately, but it's a lot nicer
I'm
than
there
it
all the
was.
time. Yeah.
So that's usually kind of like the midlife
Mhm.
tune-up. So you're probably looking in the next 10 to 15 years
Sure.
where a full-blown traffic study will be done through that corridor and DOT will be involved and we recommend this going out to, a 6-lane roadway similar to Moreland Road. I mean, County Line Road carries a lot of traffic in this village.
It sure does.
Mm-hmm.
And then, can you go back to that other slide that is the, and then the sewer rate study is being done, but don't you have an automatic rate increase on oh,
Sewer utility has not had a rate increase, I believe, since 2014.
That is, there's been some reference to a 3% increase. That's on the connection fee, not all of the rates. It's on the connection fee portion of it. And I may have,
connecting to a commercial building or something.
when a new building comes in,
Right,
whether it's residential or commercial, there's a connection fee that's charged and that increases by 3% every year.
So you have to apply to sewer pack or?
For what? A
or
rate increase?
Rate increase?
No.
You can,
We go out for a study like we're currently in.
okay,
And Ehlers, who has the contract to do that
Sure.
study, will bring back recommendations to this board for an implementation
Yeah.
schedule, much like you do a sewer pack for a water rate increase.
Right.
Or not sewer
I'm-
pack, but PSC.
PC, yeah,
And it's up
Yeah.
to the governing body to either implement what they recommend or do some sort of a modification to what they recommend. Eventually, it comes down to you.
thanks for clarifying that.
Further questions? Seeing none? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
We will then go on to the final item for the evening, water utility.
The first slide before you is the revenues related to the water utility. Much like the sewer utility, I kept the revenues flat for sales of water. I did slightly decrease the impact fees for the water utility. That is just based on less projected development and to match more closely with the historical actuals. The sales of water remained relatively flat, increasing about 1%. On the expense side, 41% of the operating budget is connected to debt service payments, depreciation, and property tax equivalent. Part of the operating or some of the more larger operating expenses is $735,000 for the water tower, as well as $150,000 for well number 7 rehab. The remaining operating supplies and expenses are for maintenance and repairs to water utility assets. And
Go ahead.
on the capital side for the water utility, there's roughly 2 million projects that have been identified. These projects will be funded via cash flow or water revenue bonds, depending on the cash flow that the water utility receives.
After the study's done?
The
No, that's,
Yeah.
that's
The
water.
water rate was, the water cash flow analysis was done and
Yeah.
presented.
Trustees?
I have a
Questions?
question. I have a question. So on, let's see, source of supply maintenance, account 50-712-530-6100, that, or 6110, I'm sorry. The increase of, let's see, 175,000 or 500%, that's for the painting of the water tower?
No, it's not. That would be well maintenance, well rehab.
And which well is that for?
We still haven't even started well 5, which was budgeted this year, and we believe it's gonna be going into next year, but well 7.
So we have well 5 and well 7 to, and what maintenance are we doing on them?
It's every 10 years, every single well has to be pulled apart, inspected, and reconditioned. And well 5 and well 7 are back-to-back rehab.
So every 10 years they have to be, is that required by DNR, by who?
That's a DNR requirement.
So aren't we not in compliance for not doing well number 5?
The recommendation is every 10 years, and whether it's 9 or 11, I mean, we don't get held accountable for that. We're doing our due diligence by getting them in as best we can.
So can we do well number 5 this year and hold off well number 7 until next year?
That is the plan.
So then why the increase if we budgeted for well number 5 last year, but we didn't do it?
Well, there's a lot of unknowns in well rehab, similar to a water main relay, road project. When a well is pulled apart, there's aquifer conditioning, there's motor replacements. And if it's a placeholder for rehab, if it's not used, it won't be consumed in the budget cycle.
So then why wasn't this budgeted last year?
Or was it?
5 was budgeted for 2023. 2024 is budgeted for well 7 next year.
Okay, so can we hold off well number 7 until next year? Or not 2024, 2025?
25.
Because we didn't even get to well number 5.
We are going to be bidding that out probably within the next month or 2. And a lot of it is juggling wells and towers being taken off a line. It could be.
Well,
I-
I'm just thinking since well number 5 didn't even get done during the budget year, why are we budgeting for another well to get done when we didn't even finish the one that we budgeted for the previous year?
We try our best to get done what we can in that budget cycle. Just
Sure. So then I don't understand why we don't just focus on well number 5 this year and plan for well number 7 in 2025.
Well, we are focusing on it right now. Like I said, we are going out to bid shortly. We are in the process of building the bid documents. And at the same time, it takes several months to get from concept to out to bid. So putting it in the bid process, I thought was the right approach. It does
Okay.
take some time to get everything in queue, out to bid, contractors lined up. I certainly don't want to push wells longer than we should. And granted, yes, one should have gotten done sooner, but it just turned out that way.
So I'll make a motion to push well number 5 to 2025 and remove the 175,000.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Trustee Peeper, can you repeat the motion, please?
Yes, I'll make a motion to remove the 175,000 for the 2024 budget and have well number 7 planned for 2025.
Do we have a second? One more time. Motion fails for lack of a second.
Really?
Yes. Further discussion?
So we're gonna lose our well, or we're not gonna maintain our well or inspect it and rebuild it when we could use that money for another police officer.
That would be, this is an example of two different funds, and you could not use,
Could we send it back to the general fund?
no, no, this is the Water Enterprise Fund is a self-sustaining separate fund, and you can't use revenues from the water utility to pay for general fund expenses. Or
So
vice.
could we use it to not increase our water rates coming up and put it back into the water fund?
No, no, if you reduce this, reducing this has no impact on the water rates.
So then what could we do with the money if we reduce it? I mean, where's this money? We're increasing the budget. Where's this money coming from to increase the budget?
It would go into water utility reserves.
Okay. I'd rather have it sit there
I think
than
that,
take the chance of it not even getting to for 2024.
I,
If I could add, Trustee Peeper, if, for example, we did not get to the project in 2024, those funds would go back into reserves. Those funds would not be lost to outside things, anything
So
that,
then didn't we budget to do well number 5 in 2023? Then why is the 2023 budget only 35,000? So if we were supposed to do this maintenance on well number 5 in 2023, but we didn't get to it, why is it only budgeted for 35,000 and why are we increasing it another 175,000? This makes no sense. How are you guys not understand? Like, how is everybody missing this?
we're not missing it. We're allowing them time to think. They're diligently plugging at their computers, trying to find the information for you.
Thank you, Trustee Baum.
It was a capital and then it was put back in means.
Would you like,
so, yep, well, number 5 was budgeted in a capital asset account. It was account 50-180-183-3140.
Which page is that on?
Oh, I'm looking at the 23 budget. On the 24 budget, it would show up.
I want to see where it's coming out and where it's being put in.
In the 24 recommended budget, if you go to the water utility capital tab, you'll see a tab for wells. And $150,000 was budgeted in that account for well number 5.
that's in the capital budget?
And if I could add that was budgeted last year in the capital budget. After learning more about the specifics of the project, it became clear this should be an operating expense because it is maintenance of a well. It's not a capital investment. So that's why the expense for in 2023 was charged to the operating account, and why you're seeing it show up in the operating budget in 2024.
So if it was charged to the operating account in 2023, then why don't we see such a large negative number?
Because it hasn't been spent yet. The work hasn't been done, so it hasn't been spent. The money is sitting in the bank account.
Okay, so money's sitting there, but now we're gonna put more money there, even though we're not sure we're gonna be able to even accomplish this task for 2024.
So we have well number 5, which is going out to bid shortly to get that one done. They're gonna come back and start the process on well number 7. If they can get all that done in 2024, then you would have 2 wells done at the same time, in the same year. We're
And I'm
taking
saying we
carryover
could
money.
maybe forego this for one more year and do the maintenance next year.
It may be done next year. It may
No, I
be
mean
done beginning of
2025.
2025. You gotta start the process at some point. They're starting the
But we're just
process. in
carrying money over from one year to the next.
If I could add, just clarify a little bit, the money, we're not putting money anywhere. The money, cash that is available, for the water utility or cash that's not being utilized by the water utility is in investment accounts and it's earning interest. What the budget is doing, and when you're looking at that line, that's a line creating budget authority. It authorizes the water superintendent to begin moving forward with the project. So there's when you create budget authority, you're not putting money someplace. It's staying in the investment accounts until it's needed, and then it's transferred over for expenditures. So you don't lose anything by creating the budget authority. I think what I would suggest is when you look at these lines, you look at it from the perspective of, do you want to authorize this work to be done in 2024? And if the answer to that is yes, then I would suggest leaving it where it is, leaving the line as it's recommended. If because of other circumstances, water main breaks or other things that come up where staff isn't able to complete the project,
Which we have had.
which we have had, there's no money lost. There's no negative financial impact on the water utility from that. It just remains in the investment accounts, the same as it would as if you removed the authority. The only thing by removing the authority, then you're telling the water superintendent not to move forward with the project in the event he is able to. So I think that's the way I would suggest looking at the decision whether or not to include that in the budget is, do you want to authorize that work to begin in 2024, or do you want to not authorize that work to begin in 2024?
Yeah, and I would not want to authorize it in 2024. I would rather have it in 2025 and put the money back into the water utility to gain interest in case another water main breaks, because we know it's going to, because that has been the history of our village.
And if the water mains are to break, then we make decisions to delay that project till the next year.
So
if
why
the
don't
water
we
mains-
have a little cushion to do it?
We do. It's built into the process.
But the cushion obviously isn't there because we all just had the presentation last night about our water utility
Yes.
and saw the history of where it's going and how we're going to need to raise rates and then again raise rates. So I would rather put it off a year and reevaluate next year.
Yeah, it's
I can see I'm not in the majority with this, so continue on.
no, okay. Further discussion? Anybody else? Seeing as none. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. That finishes all items on number 4, so we go to number 5, next meeting. Hold on a minute. Wait, I'm hearing,
No, we're good. We're
We're
good.
good?
Yeah.
okay, so next meeting is there's a Tuesday, the 24th. Yes. What's tomorrow night? Trustee Peeper, there's a,
Economic Development Commission meeting and also another meeting scheduled for the same time in the same room at 5:30 tomorrow.
Yeah, actually, Economic Development Commission is in conference room A.
okay. And what's in here? Ooh.
And Phil is
And-
also on Park and Rec and Economic Development. So I'm not quite sure how this happened.
Gonna open the door and do both.
Okay.
In
Phil's-
addition,
Phil's gonna stand in the doorway and do both.
there's a library board meeting over at the library. Thank you.
Library board.
Well,
At
We
6
have a
PM.
member that's on both Park and Rec and Economic Development, so he can't be in two places at one time.
All right. Are there any,
Meeting.
neighborhood meetings,
The next budget presentation will be, let me just double check my calendar here, or let's, I believe on the morning of, at 9 AM on the 24th. And then there will be a second budget presentation at 5:30 on the 25th.
okay. All right. We got all that's taken care of. So that's next meeting. All right, I will adjourn this meeting at 8:32. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for watching. We will see you next week.
I like your shirt, Trustee Baum. It's very festive.